Welcome, everybody, to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno, episode 15. Today's special guest is also from the University of Manitoba Bisons, offensive coordinator Vaughan Mitchell. Coach, thanks for joining us today on Huddle Up.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Coach, we've been living during the COVID era for a few months now, and things have changed rapidly since the last time we had another Bison coach on, Coach Pierre. There is no 2020 youth sports football season. So how have you been handling this time, or I guess this whether is it downtime or is it an opportunity for you to really try new things? What have you been doing with the fact that there's no games this fall?
Well, it's certainly not downtime. As Coach Doby has said, they canceled the season, but they didn't cancel the program. There's always work to be done, especially when you're a volunteer. So you take this opportunity to do deeper dives into self-analysis or now analyzing your opponent. You update your playbook. You look at your roster and you try to predict who you have and what that provides you and where you're maybe a little bit short in particular areas. So there's a lot of planning going on. So at some point things will resume back to normal, and you want to be in a position where you're able to hit the ground running. So you need to take this time and, do the work necessary to be able to, go into the next season ready to go.
Do you find that there's a difficult balance with roster spots and the guys that you are trying to fill out the team with for the next season because of the gap recruiting class that this year's guys are going to miss out on? Or how do you handle the personnel change between previous season and 2 years ahead of time, which will be next season?
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, you can take a look at who is available and who's on the roster, but they're never here until they're here. So you have some plans in your mind based on who you think is going to be here. But until that first day of, whenever the next training camp is, you're not 100% sure who you have. So it happens kind of at that point. You start taking a look and really strategizing about how you can use these student athletes in a way that harnesses the best of what they can do. So one thing that I believe in is that, you want to take a look at each group and understand that they have unique abilities. Each group is unique in and of itself. They'll have strengths, they'll have weaknesses, and it's a big part of my job to, accentuate their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. And that's different from year to year. And if you try to ask guys to do things that they're not, athletically well positioned to do, you're not going to maximize your results. So you do try to look forward and have some plans, but they're more like ideas. So there is a lot of, being able to, shift on the fly. And recruiting is such that you can't sit there and say, oh, we need to recruit. Oh, we need to get bigger at receiver or whatever the case may be. I mean, you recruit the best guys available. Yeah, you wish they're all 6'3", 215, but that's not going to be the case. You get the best guys that are available and then adapt from there.
So you talk about recruiting and with trying to make the personnel the best you can be. Do you find it more difficult during this time to be recruiting guys and to be trying to give them the opportunity to play for the Bisons for what you see fit? Or do you think that the recruiting landscape is more or less the same despite what's happened with COVID?
Coach Doby handles a lot of the recruiting. We give advice and support into what our assessment of what a player's ability might be. We don't really get too deep into, do they fit into what we're doing? Because we believe in adapting. We just try to get the best people in here at the University of Manitoba and then build around those skills. So, there isn't, a lot of, he's not a Manitoba guy. Is he, it's like anywhere else. Is he big? Is he fast? Is he physical? Does he finish? Does he move well? Some of the basic athletic components, and then we'll work with them when they're here. I don't really feel that even for a team like us that recruits nationally, that there's an ability to cherry pick. There's 30 schools that recruit. They all recruit hard. And, it's tough to go out there and be, really picky. So you try to get the best people in and then build around that. And to the extent you can do that, you'll have success.
How have the players been handling the practices and the time that you guys have now together with less pressure in terms of game results, but more pressure on individual and personal development for players?
Yeah, I just think that they're happy to be on the field. I think this is a very surreal experience for all of us. And to sort of have that sense of normalcy for them is big. And it feels very normal and familiar when they're out there on the field. And I think they appreciate that, and they've taken to it really well. There's improvement we've seen over the weeks and practices. Like, we're going twice a week, but that usually isn't enough to sort of provoke great spurts of growth or improvement. But we've seen improvement in the guys, and I think it's critical that that they stay sharp with their skills, so that when we start up again, that they say, like, for a concert violinist, if they don't play their violin for 6 months, then they never regain their touch on their instrument. And I think a lot of things are like that, and I think athletics are like that, and I think these guys need to keep at their trade, and they need to practice it, and they've been doing really well. The attendance has been really good at our practices. Not every group, like some groups are a little bit more filled with guys from out of province, so those numbers are down a little bit. But for the guys that have been in the city, the attendance has been really, really good. So we've been able to make progress, I think, and we've been able to stay sharp. And I'm really pleased at what we've been able to accomplish over the last several weeks.
Do you guys have any major goals outlined for what you guys want to achieve as a group, or particularly as an offense on your side of the ball, after this 1 year span in between seasons? Is there a specific goal that maybe is different than would be normally, or do you guys keep it the same and
yeah, it's different, but it's not hyper specific. It's about staying together. It's about positive mental health and sense of team and family. These are unprecedented times. They're difficult. Guys are having to do major shifts within their academic career, learning to remote learn, learning to learn through the internet. Those are big shifts, and these are young men that are learning to deal with the world, and we want to give them a bit of a safe haven and at football. And so we want to keep them together so that they can feel, the support of their teammates, the support of their coaches, and that they can continue to grow in a human and athletic way, because this is such a strange time. And, keeping the guys together has been great. There's a lot of laughing when we get together. There's a lot of work being done. And I think those are much more important objectives than, we want to improve the way we do our play action game. Well, yes, we are working on our play action game, but, I think those are the bigger things that we want to accomplish, because, all of these kids have committed to our program, and part of that commitment is facilitating their growth as young adults. And I think that's a far more important objective than, anything tactical or technical in terms of the game of football. So, I mean, if we can do that right, those other things will follow quite naturally. So, I think that, like I've said, keeping these guys on the football field is a huge positive, and I'm really happy to be part of that. So in terms of, other ancillary, objectives, not overly concerned. Just let's be on the field. Let's have some fun. Let's support one another. Those other things will naturally follow.
So you talk about that camaraderie and the importance of guys having that safe haven with all their other teammates, especially for the ones that are in the city, or eventually for the ones that may come back when things are more returning to normal. As a coaching staff, do you guys find that this has been a really good time to continue to gel and to develop your rapport as a group? Or how has it been in the coaches room for everybody that's on board in the city?
Well, part of the challenge is there's been no coaches room. We have to show up at the field, and we sort of just walk onto the field. So, there is typically a lot of gelling and good-natured ribbing in the coaches room. So in that regard, we've tried to use video meetings for coaches meetings, to mix success. We've had really good success with quarterback coach and quarterbacks meetings. Haven't had as many offensive staff meetings as we'd like, but everyone's dealing with this. Like all the other offensive coaches have full-time jobs, and we're asking them to be out a couple times a week, and so we're trying to find balance through this whole thing too. And I think it's given us just an opportunity to continue to work together for sure, but we haven't been able to really sit down and really re-examine some of the micro intricacies of the offense. We started to do that. We had some excellent meetings, and then COVID hit, and then just the ability to sit in a room together has been limited. The ability to sit in the room and watch film together has been eliminated. So, I do think that we'll get back there. And, right now, I think the key thing is that, we keep going. We keep the position coaches linked to their players in their group. And that's the key relationship that needs to be maintained. We're adults, we're professionals, we'll find a way to make it work.
When people talk about the changes that have happened during COVID and what changes there may come to football, when you talk about video meetings for watching and reviewing film, do you think that that's something carrying forward into the future that you'd like to explore more of as a coach to create that flexibility? Or do you think that there's a huge importance in having guys physically in the room together when you're breaking down film?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's an interesting tool, video meetings, and I think it's most effectively used for certain things and not others. I'm a big believer in the value of getting people in the same room. There is something lost when you do things over video, but at the same time, it can be a very valuable tool. I do think that it can be used, to link to guys that aren't in Winnipeg in the off season. So it opens up a whole bunch of possibilities in those months where guys return back home. You can stay connected. It opens up a whole bunch of possibilities with guys that are recent commitments to the program. So you get a guy commit and say January, he's not going to be on campus till August. Now there's a whole different realm of opportunities to connect with them, to show them film, to show them PowerPoint presentations, to put a face to a name, much more so than what you can accomplish on the phone. So some of these things where you maybe used to do it on the phone, doing through video is better. Some of these other things where it's best to do in person will still be best to do in person. I do absolutely think there are opportunities, but it's not going to replace the face-to-face meetings. The best meetings will always be face-to-face. The best meetings will always be where we can sit in a room and put film up and point and discuss, and it will go back and forth. There is a fluidity to discussions that are in person that just don't happen in the same way when you're on a Zoom call or whatever. But that doesn't mean it can't be a great tool. It's just not going to replace the absolute necessity of meeting in the same room on a regular basis.
I couldn't agree. And I understand with working with a football team and just a team in general, it doesn't have to be sports. When you're at work, people talk about enjoying the flexibility of being at home, just kicking it in their PJs and doing work from home. But there is something lost, and that I don't think can ever be replaced from human social interaction, because that's such an important component, especially of building chemistry on a football team. You have to physically be there, because when you're playing, you're going to physically be there with them as well.
Absolutely. Just being in the same room means something. You don't connect the same way over video. But at the same time, I think what we've been forced to learn through using video will make what we do when we go back to normal all the better, because it can be a supplement, a complement to these other things we're doing. It doesn't replace them, but it opens up doors for us to be connected to our student athletes in a way we couldn't be before. I'm a guy that hates talking on the phone. I hate it. I've always hated it. Hated it in high school. Hated it in university. I don't find it, because you just don't know. You don't have enough information about what the other person is thinking or doing, because, as we both know, so much of communication is nonverbal. You do get a bit of that when you get with someone on a video call. You get to see how their body's reacting and what they think, whether they're rolling their eyes, whether they're smiling, whatever the case may be. and all of those things are important. So it opens up possibilities for us, but and we will use it. It is a really neat tool, but it's not going to replace being together. But I will say, in terms of, say, a bunch of us offensive coaches being, all volunteers. So every moment that we put into the program, there's only so many of those. Our bank account is only so deep, and you can only make so many withdrawals in a year. So if we can eliminate for some guy, having to drive half an hour to the stadium and half an hour home, that's another hour on top of the maybe hour or 2 hours we're going to meet. We can make it a little bit more simple, where they just need to walk down into their basement and jump on a video call. Maybe we get a heck of a lot more of those coaches meetings throughout the course of the winter. It's also minus 30 out, right? So it's a lot easier to not have to jump in your car, not deal with the winter, not deal with the slick streets, whatever the case may be, and jump on a video call. So again, but we still will have to meet in person because, as you indicated, and quite rightly, there's a chemistry that needs to be developed, and that's best done in person.
So we're going to take it back a little bit here, going to your football origins. So you've been with the Bisons program for a while. Fort Richmond collegiate guy, growing up in Winnipeg, without a high school football team here in our end of the city. Played Fort Garry Lions. Was football something that was a part of your life ever since you can remember growing up, or was it something you acquired later on?
No, I remember I was 10 years old, and I was just walking to go to the playground or whatever, and I saw I was a big hockey guy. My dad wanted me in hockey, so I played as much hockey as I could from the youngest age. But I was about 10 years old, and I was walking to go to the park, like I said, and I saw this group of kids out in a field playing football, and my heart just sunk right into my stomach. And I couldn't believe, I don't know where this came from. I couldn't believe I wasn't out there, and I just saw what they were doing, and I said, I need to do that. And so I went home and complained to my parents, and it was too late to get on that team. But they signed me up the next year, and from there it's just been, my passion. I've had, fair degree of success as a young football player. I was good enough that I was able to go play at the University of Manitoba, and it's just something that, for whatever reason, and you hear these stories sometimes, you just see it and you go, yes, I need to do that.
So you played for U of M, and coming from what would have been, I guess, midget football back then, right, for
Yeah.
the Lions. So what was the landscape of football like when you were playing for the Bisons? Because the eras of university and midget versus high school have changed drastically over the last 20, 30 years. So what was your experience like playing in Manitoba?
Yeah, I remember as a young kid watching the Bison game. They used to be on CKND, and that was a big event for me. I really enjoyed watching those games. I thought the Bisons were really cool. And, being a kid growing up in Fort Richmond and just being able to, be around campus and on campus and you ride your bike around campus kind of thing, and you'd see the Bison football players, and they were so cool. We'd go and we'd try to sneak into Max Bell, and they had the guy working the desk there would let us in. His name was Ross Garland, and he was an all-Canadian center, and he was so cool. So I always held the Bisons in super high regard. That's what I wanted to do as a football player. And, so I played Pop Warner for Richmond Kings, and then went to Fort Garry. We were terrible. The Richmond Kings were just a terrible football team, and I don't think I was going to continue. But then I got this very nicely worded form letter from Fort Garry Lions, but it sounded very personal. And it really affected me as a young guy, and I thought it was, wow, they've scouted me kind of thing. So I went and gave that a try, and it went pretty well. But back when I was growing up, Bantam and Midget were kind of the top league, and high school was this thing over there that only had a few teams, and it wasn't very big at the time. And most of the top players that were going on to play junior and going on to play university were coming out of the midget background, simply because there was such a small number of high school teams. So, I had the opportunity to play on some provincial teams, and then from there got kind of recruited to go to the Bisons, which was really cool. And so went to spring camp in grade 11 and did okay, didn't get killed kind of thing. And then got hauled aside by I was playing defensive line at the time, George Motosh, very, very famous local football coach, D-line coach, coach for the Bombers as well, pulled me aside and was quite upset to learn that I was only in grade 11 and I wasn't graduating and going to grade 12 and he'd have to wait another year. So, I mean, it was a good start. I got connected into the Bisons early, but they weren't a very good football team. They were 0-7. I think they were 1-7 the year before, and then I came on and they were 0-8 my very first year. So it wasn't a very, very good. It wasn't a very good team, but at the time it didn't matter to me. My goal and my aspiration was to play for my hometown team, the team that I had grown up admiring so much, and to be able to play football at that level. So it really ticked all the boxes. I'm a bit of a homer. I had no desire. I mean, for example, Calgary, UBC could have recruited me all they want. And I'm not saying I was a national recruit. I'm saying it wouldn't have mattered. I was playing for the University of Manitoba. That was just set in my mind. And, I was super, super happy to be there. The record didn't really matter. There were things when I got there that were eye-opening, I thought would be different. But those things quickly changed. The head coach at the time, Danny Rusico, who was also a professor in the faculty, later to become dean of the faculty, he got fired or relieved of his duties or however it works. And then they brought in a new coach who was very, very football oriented. And that was a shot in the arm to the program and myself, and enjoyed the way some of the more scientific and analytical aspects that he brought to the game. He was a bit of a taskmaster and didn't like some of the other things, which taught me, interestingly, some ways not to do things. But yeah, it was. There was no doubt in my mind that I wanted to be a Bison, and I felt that I was going to be good enough to be there. So I was super happy to put on that jersey and walk onto the field as a Bison that first day.
Reminds me when I was speaking with Coach Pierre, talking about the strength of the program at the time in which you guys entered. I'm not sure if you guys crossed over in eras, but the team didn't seem to be in a great position, and that changing of coaches and changing of culture is something that I think is a trend amongst many university programs, because it's not like the pros where you get years and years and years till a person retires to build a culture. You get 4 or 5 years with kids and nothing else. And back when you're playing, you had people who are faculty, staff, who are professors, coaching, and now it's super high tech, and university is the king of amateur football, minus some junior coaches and teams and players. But what was it a very shocking experience getting to university, considering that was something that was a huge goal of yours when you were younger? Or was it a bit underwhelming with what you had expected when you first got to the Bisons and throughout your career?
That's a great question. Just back to Coach Pierre. Stan and I played midget football together at Fort Garry Lions. And then we came together in 1989 to the Bisons. So our paths have been very much linked since we were, 15, 16 years old. I think for myself, when I arrived, there was a lot of amazing things. But I felt that, rightly or wrongly, I felt Stan and I brought a bit of a seriousness or commitment level that maybe wasn't there. Like, there was a lot of great guys, a lot of great personalities on the team, but I just felt that, that we looked at the game a little bit differently. A lot of guys were, they go play junior because the team wasn't winning. We were interested in turning it around and doing the things necessary to turn it around, and not really accepting anything less. So it certainly extended far past us in terms of why the program got turned around a little bit. But, I do think that when we arrived, we were some would say, for lack of a better way, we were mature beyond our years. Not that we were smarter than the other guys, but while the other guys were looking at this as more of a hobby, an entry point into a good time, we we took it a little bit more seriously. We wanted to be the best football players we could be. We wanted to do the things to help the team win. And I think we helped in that regard, and at least, change the culture a little bit. I just take a look at, how seriously we've both taken coaching. So, I mean, some of it has to have been there in the beginning, that, that this is something that this is very important to us, and we're going to take it as seriously as possible. And we've made it a part of our lives. As for your second part of the question, I mean, it was a couple stories. The guys, of course, were bigger and they were faster, but there were times where a guy that maybe 3, 4, 5 years older than you've grown up and you've gotten to know, and now you're on their team, but they were your hero when you're 16, 17 years old, and now you're pushing them around the football field a little bit. It was a bit of an eye-opening one like that. So, you learn to believe in yourself a little bit, because, you grow up and you learn that, it's not a social club, you know what I mean? And it will come down to who are great football players, and football players win, personalities are great and everything. But, we needed to clean out some guys, and some guys, really started to take it seriously, and it was great. It was great to see that transition, but it needs a catalyst. And I'm not saying Stan and I were a catalyst to that, but I am certainly proud to have been part of a larger group that began to change the culture around the University of Manitoba Bison football team, to take it from this team that had always kind of been at the bottom of the table and bring it back up and put it at the top of the table, at least for a couple of years. It was a great experience.
So you and Stan then have had a long intertwined history together in football here in Winnipeg, and you guys also now are a part of the coaching staff and have been, besides Coach Dobie, are the two I guess most tenured coaches on the Bisons coaching staff. So what got you into coaching, and how did you get the opportunity to be a part of the Bisons as a coach?
That's a great question. I was a pretty big guy in high school, but then I got to be 6'1", 245, 250. I just didn't grow beyond that. So I knew quite early that, I'm not going into the CFL. I'm playing with guys. Like, this was still the time I was playing offensive line. This is still the time where teams had one or maybe two offensive linemen that were 250 pounds. They're not all three. They weren't all 300 pounds like they are now. But, there was no delusion. I held no delusion that I was going to the CFL. But whereas my body stopped growing, my mind didn't. I started to understand the game. Like, each year I was making less and less gains physically, but more and more gains mentally and intellectually. I was understanding the game more. And so that really became the landscape at which I challenged myself, was to learn more about the game, learn about coverages, even though I was an offensive lineman. So I think that, the desire to continue that growth is something that attracted me to coaching. And I do think that, just interacting with my teammates, they could tell that, perhaps I was limited physically, but I understood the game and was able to help others around me be better. So that when I was done playing after my 5 years, Mike Watson, who was coaching at Surgeon Creek Collegiate, as it was called at the time, he invited me to come onto their staff. And so I did, and ran the offense there for 3 years, and coached with him for 3 years. And it was a fantastic growth opportunity. Mike's went on to be a fantastic head coach, a championship head coach at St. Paul's High School, took the Winnipeg Rifles to 7-1, and I think there were 1 or 2 in the country that year. Did incredible things. So he was great to learn under. And also there was enough room, because I pretty much was the only coach on offense to do whatever I want. Not quite whatever I wanted, but there was a lot of space there for me to occupy in terms of the things I wanted to explore. So that was a great experience. And then at the university, when Brian came on, he made some changes after his first year, and had made a change at the offensive line position. And I interviewed with him and Dwayne Hyssop. And that was the position I played, and I did still coach the offensive line at Sturgeon. So, and you know, with it being your passion, I was always trying to get videos. I mean, I don't even think the internet was really a thing when I started coaching, right? It was that long ago. So now if you're starting out, you want to learn, you just go to Google, you type in offensive line drills and a million things come up. But back then it wasn't as easy. So you're trying to get videos, you're going to clinics, you're doing whatever you can to get better and to learn more. And I had done that through the 3 years that I was at Sturgeon. So I was pretty well positioned, and being an alum really helped. So I got the position with the Bisons at a pretty young age, 26, I think I was at the time. And it was a good fit. It really was. I really enjoyed it. And again, just worked really hard for a couple of years. And then in 99, after some changes, got to be the coordinator on offense. And it was a time where, I obviously had finished my first degree and not quite had started my master's. So, I had a little bit more flexibility in my time. I wasn't married, so I could really, really dive deeply into, what it takes to be a coach and do the work. And because even then, sure, there was computers, but there was no football software. Right. So you're doing all of this data entry by hand, and then you're crunching the numbers using pivot tables in Excel by hand.
Oh man.
You're drawing up fronts and coverages by hand, doing cards for practice by hand. So it's a very laborious process. It's a time consuming process, and I had the time, so I was able to invest it there, and so it's been sort of, that gradual progression. But I think back to it, it was just recognizing early on that, the CFL is not going to be a thing. I love this game. I love it. I love this game. I want to be involved with it. It means a lot to me. I always joke, and, I'm not God's gift to football, but football is God's gift to me, right? It means that much to me. So I wanted to stay involved, and coaching's a way to do it. I love the camaraderie in the coach's room. I love the teasing back and forth. It's just fantastic. And so it's a huge part of my life. And it's in a way, it's a non-negotiable part of my life. And it just means a ton to me to be a coach.
So how do you continue to find motivation with the position that you're in? So we had mentioned earlier before our call, that you had no family at the time, and you were still very, very young, and were just before a master's degree, which again is a super time consuming thing. With all the time in the world to dive deeply into coaching and how rapidly the game has changed since, what keeps you coming back to coaching, knowing that it's not a real full-time, like, income paying job as if you were a head coach or a faculty staff member, now having a family? Obviously there's technological advancements that make so much of the programming way easier on the computer, but what keeps you coming back to coach, knowing that you're in a position where you're a volunteer, you also have a full-time job and a family to raise and other things to do? How do you handle that situation?
It's pretty easy because it's my passion. It's like asking a gardener, why do you garden? They're just going to die. So your plants are just going to die during the winter, right? All those other things that you mentioned are not important to me. I don't need to derive my income or my primary income from football. It's about doing something that you're tremendously passionate about, that gives to me, that helps fulfill me. There's 24 hours in the day, and you need to find a way to use all of those hours. I think that with each year you learn how to be a little bit more efficient. My undergraduate degree is in economics, and so this concept of efficiency has always been very intriguing to my brain, and figuring out how to do ways to do things the most amount in the least amount of time, but still produce high level results. So, I've grown to understand over the years what the limits are. And then, from there, I mean, it's still a player driven game, right? coaches don't win games. Coaches can lose games, but coaches don't win games. Players win games. So once you kind of find out what is required to place the players in a position to be successful, it's up to them to really take it and then deliver that home, right? We don't play the game for them; they play the games, and it's still a ton of work. But there are no magic bullets, right? There are no magic plays, so it's really about the players. And when you realize that there are going to be years where you're going to have maybe not so talented of a group, and then you're going to have other years where you have a talented group. So there's going to be ups and downs. Injuries are going to play a role, but really you just understand what the best process that's possible in order to put these guys in a position to be successful. And through the course of time, you've learned how to do that efficiently, and then the results take care of themselves. And you just want to make sure that the guys are learning and growing along the way, because ultimately that's why we do these things. I always tell our guys, I walk them through the things that I think are important in how they conduct themselves as student athletes, as football players, and I share with them that we stress these things because the things that will make you successful in the game of football are the same things that are going to make you successful in the game of life. So we want to prepare them to, when they go forward, that they can utilize and understand that the skills they've developed through the game of football are the things that are going to help propel them forward as a professional. I tell them, I can guarantee you're going to become a professional. I can't guarantee you'll become a professional football player, but whether it's accountants or engineers or landscape architect or whatever the case may be, you're going to develop a profession, and these are the skills that you're going to need to propel you forward. So yeah, it is about wins and losses, and I love winning football games. But there's a bit of a template, and as long as you're staying true to that template and you're putting in the time, and I know I'd always love to put in more time. Don't get me wrong. It's not about, figuring out how little you can put in. It's figuring out how much you can put in with the time you're given. And if you can, I hold myself to a high enough standard that if I can meet my own standard, that I'll know that I've done enough to put the players that we have in a position to be successful, and then the results take care of themselves.
And I think you touched on a lot of the same points I remember Coach Pierre talking about, and I think it's a cultural thing in general with Manitoba from you guys, is making sure that guys are prepared and that you're teaching young men, is that your job is to be a teacher essentially, because many guys that play for the Bisons won't end up playing in the CFL or playing NFL football, and that's a very, very slim percentage. So preparing them for the skills they're going to be using after they're done playing football is more important than trying to get them to cut corners the fastest way to play in the pros. Because even if you play in the pros, how many guys last for years and years and years? It's not common. So there has to be that influence. And to jump into my next question, who would you say was the biggest coaching influence that you've had in your playing career and also as a coach?
Yeah, I think you take a little bit from everybody. I think from a player standpoint, Scott Spurgeon came in, was very, very football oriented. He did very well on the tactical and technical side. Did not do well, as they say in soccer, on the man management side. So, but you take something from that, right? You take a look at how a particular coach treats people, and you take the things from it you like, and then the things that you don't like, you make sure you don't do those things. And that if you fall into that trap later on, you think back on it and you say, I don't want to be that. So you take a little bit from everybody, but you should never try to be someone you're not. I think you just need to be yourself. I think it's about being self-aware in a lot of different ways. You need to be true to how you see the football game and not try to be that coach over there or that coach over there. The best chance you have is being yourself. And kind of drawing back to the previous question on the idea of self-awareness, I think that if you can be self-aware and look at a film and see that your team won, and there's a lot of things you didn't do as a coordinator, but your team still won. Or another game where you can look back where the players just didn't play well, and you're like, well, I kind of like all my calls. And you look back at the week of prep and you're like, well, we had a pretty good week, and we just didn't come to game day. Now you can always ask yourself, what more could I have done to get them ready on game day? But my point being is, if you can separate your self-image from the outcome of the football game, you can learn a lot. And you can, and one of the main things you learn is that players win, and there's a lot more to this game than what the score says on the scoreboard. So that self-awareness is important, and it takes a long time to get there. So I've had the benefit of starting rather young at the U Sports level, CIS, or I don't even know, it was CIAU, I think it was called when I started.
Yeah.
Through several different rebrandings. But if you can stick around for a while and sort of see that, you're an important but small part of the team's success, that you can govern yourself accordingly, and then understand that how you fit into the grander scheme of things. And that's when you can really start understanding that it is about the players and their growth as people. And yeah, you know what? They listen to you a lot more when you win. That's the thing. And that's the attractiveness of winning football games, is that when you say, listen, we need to do A, B, and C, and those things will lead to win, and then that happens, then they're going to start buying into the total message that you're coming across. So it's easier to instill within them those important things when you're winning. But winning isn't the best teacher. Losing can also be a teacher. So it's part of the greatest challenge as a coach is balancing those things out, and trying to tell guys that yes, we're winning, but we need to continue to do these things better. Or when you're losing, to say, guys, we need to focus on these things that we're doing well and do them more of them, kind of thing. And that's, a huge part about coaching, much more than, probably much more than the X's and O's. And so little of what I do is about fancy diagrams and plays and trickery and trick plays and all of those types of things. It's such a tiny part. Calling plays on game day is such a tiny part of what I do. I don't mean to go off on too much of a tangent here, but if you want to be an offensive coordinator, you got to be in love with football between Sunday and Friday. That's when you got to love football, not on Saturday when you play. For me, and I know Coach Pierre said this on I hate game day. I hate it. I'm full of nerves. I'm nervous. It's such an emotional day. I love the rational side of the game. It's such an emotional day. If we lose, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. I mean, despite all the things I've just said, right? That's how I feel after a loss. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's how I feel. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. When you win, you're like, man, the players played great today. Man, the players played great today. And sometimes you win and they don't play great, and you feel terrible too.
Yeah.
So it's the game day is such an emotional day. But I think if you want to be a great offensive coordinator, you absolutely have to love the game between Sunday and Thursday, because that's when you're putting in the work. That's when you're breaking down film. That's when you're inputting data. That's when you're producing scouting reports. That's when you're developing scripts. That's when you're developing practice plans. That's when you're developing cards for the scout team. If you do those things good, you do those things well, and can bring passion to doing those things, then you're putting your guys in a position to win. If you're cutting corners on those things, forget about game day. Forget about it. Forget about it.
Coach, we're almost getting towards the end of our time. It's been super enjoyable getting into the nitty-gritty of offense and really the process that is necessary as an offensive coordinator. You got to really love what you're doing. I love how you phrase that. You hate game day because the reason I think why people love sports is because it gives us a rational reason to be emotionally irrational. People love freaking out, going crazy, like watching the Raptors game 7 yesterday. Like, we're all freaking out and, oh my goodness, this, that. But at the end of the day, the sun will rise tomorrow, no matter whether they win or lose. They don't put food on your table. They don't put clothes on your back. Yeah. But we enjoy feeling that irrational, emotional state. And you talk about being a rational guy and very high thinking. And you get to game day and you lost, but you called it a game. Oh, it's all my fault. Like, that's just – I feel so much relation in that sentiment alone. So our last question here before we wrap up is, what is, or if there's a specific moment of it, the most rewarding feeling as a football coach, whether it be there's one specific memory you have that's the most rewarding, whether it have been winning a game or seeing a result of a player's life years later, or or a moment in general or a feeling in general that is the most satisfying thing, like the why of coaching for you.
Oh, that's easy. I'm not even going to say, like, you're right when you say, when you meet, it is awesome when you meet a guy that a few years out of football and he comes back and shares how much playing at the school meant to him. And I've had some really good experiences with guys coming back and saying, I totally didn't buy in, not 100% to what you're saying, Coach, but now I'm out in the world and I completely get it. And the things that you have shared have helped me. And those things are big. Don't get me wrong. But on the day-to-day thing this is such a no-brainer for me. It's when you break down film for hours and hours and hours, and you feel this defense, and you identify something that you can take advantage of. And it's mostly around of the forward pass. And then you design a play to take advantage of something that you think you see as a weakness. Then you insert the play during the week of practice. You practice the play. You practice the play in a specific circumstance. You teach the quarterback that if this and this happens, this is what I want for you to do with the football. And then when you're sitting in the booth on game day and you have the right play called, they do what you expect, and the quarterback throws a forward pass and we complete it. That is why I coach. That is why I coach. Not entirely, but those are the nuggets of feedback that you get on the micro level that really make you feel good about coaching, right? And it doesn't even have to be a touchdown pass, right? But, there are big things, but really you do need to find some small things to help you get through the day, because it is a grind. It is a challenge to balance, this work life I have. I have a 9-to-5 job. I have to be dedicated to that and a certain person when I'm at work. And then I have this other life as a coach, which is really different. And so you're at least two people in any given day. So to justify that duplicity, you need to find happiness in some small things. And that's absolutely it. When you all this work you put in, you get that immediate positive feedback, and that what you've not only identified, you've drawn it up, you've implemented it, and now you've executed it. And that happens enough. It doesn't happen a ton, right? But it happens enough that, man, you feel good about yourself. You feel that in that way that you've brought something to the game, and you brought something specific. One of the things we talk about is we want to leverage a scientific approach to identify game-specific strategies to attack our opponent's weaknesses. So when you can do that, you're kind of fulfilling your mission, and you feel good about yourself, and you feel that you're almost in those small and few circumstances during the game, you're almost on the same level as the players in terms of making a contribution. Now that doesn't like I said, maybe that happens twice a game because it's about players. I mean, you probably the best play you're going to call in any given game is going to be the simplest play, and and they're just going to execute it, right? And it's a big play. And, it changed the game. It's the simplest play in our play. We've run that play 800 times, right? So, no, that's something that that little thing where you can see yourself as part of what just happened on the field, that makes you feel really good. But again, it's about it's about the players and what they bring, and hopefully I can bring a little bit to them each and every play. But those ones you feel a little bit more.
Coach, I couldn't agree more with your sentiment and be reveled at the simplicity of what really makes you tick as a coach, but so often is way overlooked. Because when you think about coaches and the impacts, and Coach Pierre talked about, like the unfettered joy he said about winning the Vanier Cup, and he's like, another piece of wisdom he's always passed on to me is that winning football games is hard. So people, they try to win, and what about for the coaches that they don't win all the time? Or you look at the NFL, like Dan Reeves has won a Super Bowl, but he leads NFL history in most losses as a coach total ever. You know, Jeff Fisher went to the Super Bowl. Jeff Fisher led many great teams, second in losses all time in NFL history. Brett Favre, right? You know, is a Hall of Famer, all these stats, blah, 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 leads NFL history in interceptions. So if you like, there's a famous quote, you know, if you want to increase your success, double your rate of failure. And that small moment where you drop a play, you study film like a madman, and then you see it work in a game, you're like, yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad that was a part of that. And I think that is such a great thing that I think people in all their crafts, like outside of sports, can really revel in, is knowing that some small little contribution you made, even if it's mundane or looked over and no one thinks about it, you helped out and you were able to put others in a position to do their job. And you were able to make it just that little much better, which I think is a great thing for people to take away. So Coach, with that, like, thanks so much for joining us. It's been super enjoyable, really getting into the nitty-gritty details of coaching again, and on the opposite side of the ball, and really understanding why people need to get into coaching as what is, I guess, either a volunteer profession or like an actual job profession.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I would look at it very differently if I was drawing my paycheck from football. But one of the beautiful parts about this is that I feel a sense of freedom, or there's an absence of weight associated when I show up to football, because it's not my source of income. It's not how I pay my mortgage. So in that respect, I love the fact that you know, I can be a volunteer coach and coach at a high level and have access to, you know, world-class facilities to participate in the game of football. It's a phenomenal in that regard. I certainly wouldn't want to move around the country every 2 years like some of these CFL coaches have to do, or NFL coaches have to do. And just to your excellent point, I think one of the really cool things that is coming out of football culture at the moment is understanding the difference between failing and failure, and understanding that failing is a natural part of learning, and that it should be understood as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for learning. Failure is when you quit. And if we can teach our guys the difference between failing and failure, I think we're doing them a great service in life. And, you know, that's part of why we're there. It takes a long time to figure out that, you know, you're coaching a lot of things other than X's and O's and plays. And it takes a long time to figure out is you can't hang everything on the scoreboard, you know, because, you know, there's some really great people that don't win all the time. There's really great people that fail, you know. You identified some excellent examples, but yeah, I love being a part of the game. I think football is a fantastic teacher of life lessons. I love the fact that, you know, it's a game where there's, you know, tall people and short people, fat people and skinny people, and slow people and fast people, and black people and white people, and everyone, you know, everyone can find a role. And what players truly care about is, can you contribute to us winning? That's it. I really think football culture is moving in that direction. It's what you bring to the team. It's not about any of those other false things. It's not about how rich you are or how poor you are or anything. Do you help us win? Are you prepared to sacrifice and do the things necessary to help us win football games? And in that regard, I wish we had a little bit more of that in broader society. But I think football is a great teacher of that. And I look forward to continuing to have the opportunity to teach that to a lot of young men for hopefully many years to come.
Well, Coach, that's a great way to wrap up our conversation. Thanks again so much for joining us today. It's been a great time, really diving into all the things that have to do with coaching and about that culture within football and university football.
Yeah, thank you. You're doing a great job. I love the podcasts. I listen to them, and good luck in the future. You've done a number of really interesting ones, and I encourage anyone who has the misfortune of listening to this one to search out other ones, because there's a lot of good ones that you've done.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And everybody, thank you for listening to episode 15 with offensive coordinator of the Manitoba Bisons, Vaughn Mitchell.